On December 1st, Vladimir Putin stood in front of the cameras and declared victory in Pokrovsk, the crown jewel of Donbass that his generals swore would fall like a ripe apple and hand him the keys to the entire Eastern Front. That was a lie so bold it makes Watergate look like a parking ticket. A desperate psyop timed perfectly to gaslight the world just days before Trump's envoys touched down in Moscow for peace talks. Over a week later, Pokrovsk is still standing, battered but unbroken, with Ukrainian defenders turning every street into a kill sack that's chewing up Russian assault waves like a meat grinder on overdrive. And while Putin's propagandists parade fake flags and recycled footage to sell the fairy tale of conquest, the truth on the ground is a nightmare for Moscow. Ukraine isn't just holding, they're hunting, and the body count in those foggy ditches is climbing faster than oil prices after a refinery strike. This is not a setback for Russia. This is their Stalingrad in miniature, and it's exposing the rotten core of Putin's war machine for the entire world to see. Let's start with the big lie itself. December 1st wasn't a triumph, it was theater. Russian state media flooded the airwaves with grainy clips of soldiers planting tricolors on some rubble heap they claimed was City Hall. But Euromaidan Press and ISW geolocators called BS immediately. Those flags were from a suburb 3 kilometers out. And the real fight was still raging in the northern high-rises where Ukrainian 110th Mechanized Brigade was raining javelin fire on anything with tracks. Putin needed the win to strut into those U.S. talks like he held all the cards, to whisper to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner that Pokrovsk was toast and Ukraine was begging for mercy. Instead, he walked in bluffing with a busted flush, and now his army is paying the tab in blood and steel. Fast forward to December 10th, and you see the real story unfolding in the mud and fog around Pokrovsk, where Russia tried to pull off a classic mechanized blitz, figuring the pea soup weather would blind Ukraine's FPV drones and give their T-72 seconds a fighting chance to punch through to the city center. Big mistake. Huge. The 7th Rapid Response Corps of Ukraine's air assault forces dropped the footage on Telegram that same day. Russian columns, armored cars, BMPs, even motorcycles loaded with Spetsnaz rolling out of the southern tree line like it was 1943 Kursk all over again, thinking the damp, chill, and low visibility would be their umbrella. They were wrong, dead wrong. The 68th Jaeger Brigade, named for the outlaw hero Alexei Dovbush, spotted the first box of armor creeping forward and lit it up with an FPV drone that turned the lead vehicle into a fireball before the driver could even radio for backup. What followed was a symphony of destruction. Artillery from the 31st Mechanized pounding the survivors, grad rockets walking fire down the column, and more FPVs picking off the stragglers like clay pigeons. Ruslan Muzichuk, spokesperson for the Ukrainian National Guard, put it bluntly. The fog was thick, but our eyes were sharper. They thought the weather was their friend. It was our ally. By sundown, the assault was scrap metal scattered across a kilometer of muddy fields, with Ukrainian spotters counting at least 12 hulks burning and dozens of Russian dead clogging the anti-tank ditches they were supposed to cross. That wasn't luck. That was preparation. Ukraine knew the push was coming because their intel, American satellites, British signals, intercepts, and local partisans feeding coordinates in real time painted the whole picture. The fog didn't hide the Russians. It just made the explosions prettier on drone cams. And this wasn't a one-off. It's the pattern now. Wave after wave of Russian meat assaults slamming into Pokrovsk's outer ring, where Ukrainian engineers have turned every ravine into a death trap laced with mines, tripwires, and remote claymores that detonate the second a boot crosses the line. Euromaidan Press tallied it up. In November alone, Ukrainian forces in the Pokrovsk Bulge killed 1,221 Russians and wounded 545 more, with 519 dead just inside the city limits. Bodies piling up in the ditches of death, as one Ukrainian operator called them, shallow scrapes meant to slow armor, but now overflowing with the frozen corpses of conscripts who thought they were on a 3-month tour. Russia claimed 234 clashes across the front that day, 49 inches, Pokrovsk alone, but the big mechanized hammer they swung, it bounced off a shield forged in 3 years of hell. Pokrovsk hasn't fallen because Ukraine turned it into a fortress of fire, where every advance costs Moscow a battalion and every victory Putin announces is just another lie to keep his own people from rioting. This is the real story the Kremlin doesn't want you to see. Not a crumbling Ukrainian line, but a Russian army bleeding out in the mud while the world watches and wonders how much longer Putin can afford to throw lives at a wall that won't break. Stay locked. because in part 2, we dive into the secret U.S. intel feeds that let Ukraine see the assault coming a mile away, the one Russian general who just got sacked for this fiasco, and the body count that's making even Moscow's propagandists sweat. The lie is crumbling, and Pokrovsk is standing taller than ever. Wave after wave of Russian meat assaults crashing into Pokrovsk's outer defenses like human waves against a concrete wall, and the result is the same every time. A battlefield turned into a slaughterhouse where Russian corpses are stacking up so high in the anti-tank ditches that their own follow-on troops have to climb over them just to advance 1 muddy meter. That's the gruesome reality Euromaidan Press laid bare this week. A hellscape where Putin's liberation looks more like a mass grave with tracks. It started with Russia's big gamble in the Dobropilya salient, just a few miles north of Pokrovsk, where back in early November, everything pointed to a breakthrough. Trench art columnist David Axe wrote then that Ukraine's lines were stretched thinner than a bad poker hand, reserves sucked dry holding Dobropilya while Pokrovsk bled out, and the whole front was about to snap. Axe had the receipts. Russian pincers closing, Ukrainian counterpunches fizzling, the math screaming collapse. But a month later, Dobropilya is still Ukrainian soil, and Pokrovsk is holding like a fist around a grenade. Russia didn't punch through, they got stuck, and now they're paying in blood to hold what little they grabbed, shifting from aggressive thrusts to desperate clutches just to keep the salient from evaporating under Ukrainian drone fire and artillery walks. The cost? Hundreds of Russian lives shoveled into the grinder every dawn as Moscow's generals feed the front with fresh battalions to stop Ukraine from clawing back the ground they clawed for. The Russian command keeps throwing thousands to prevent Ukraine from reclaiming terrain, Euromaidan reports, while Ukrainians suppress the waves with everything they've got. It's not manpower superiority. Russia outnumbers Ukraine 8-1 in spots. It's the meat against the machine. Zelensky himself said last week Russia has 170,000 troops massed around Pokrovsk, a quarter of their entire Ukraine force, and still they can't crack it. That's not a siege. That's suicide by stalemate. And the pattern repeats in Volodymyrivka, the liberated village Russia announced back in August like it was the fall of Berlin. Geolocated drone footage from Euromaidan shows 2 Russian soldiers, probably Spetsnaz, judging by the kit, picking through the rubble like rats in a trap, clambering over bricks and beams, thinking the ruins are cover. Wrong. A lone Ukrainian paratrooper, guided by that same drone's thermal eye, waits in the debris like a ghost in the machine. The Russians get close, too close, and he pops up. M4, barking short bursts. They scramble for a wall remnant, but the paratrooper flanks, drone whispering coordinates in his ear, and drops them both, one in the back, the second the assault group commander, by the stripes right through the helmet. Scenes like this play out dozens of times a day. Euromaidan nails it. Small Ukrainian teams, outnumbered but wired into the sky, neutralizing infiltrators before they can mass into anything dangerous. Russia floods the zone with bodies and boxes of armor, betting brute force overwhelms. Ukraine answers with precision. FPVs that see through fog, Jaegers that wait in the weeds, artillery that times its thunder to the drone's whisper. The meat grinder Putin built is now grinding his own sausage, and the smell is starting to turn stomachs even in the Kremlin. This isn't just holding Pokrovsk. It's humiliating Russia at a cost they can't sustain forever. Stay with me, because in part 3, we expose the secret U.S. intel feeds, turning Pokrovsk into a Russian graveyard. The one general Putin just sacked over this bloodbath, and the body count that's making even Moscow's hardliners whisper enough. The grinder is spinning, and it's Russian bones getting pulverized. Part 2, 10000 key 2 doom, plus or minus 7, 0 dock to 6, foot 40, GIA, Lian match, Kongsung Dong Tua, Jungmi drama, Jetiki Mado military summary. 8 Russian soldiers for every Ukrainian defender in the Pokrovsk sector. 8-1. And still the city laughs in Putin's face every single morning. 8-1, and the only thing that number buys Moscow is a faster trip to the graveyard. Because Ukraine isn't fighting with bodies anymore. They're fighting with ghosts in the sky and demons in the ditches. And the Russian army is learning the hard way that numbers mean nothing when every step forward is a step over your own dead. Euromaidan Press calls them the ditches of death, and the name sticks because it's literal. Birds of Magyar, one of Ukraine's deadliest drone units, just dropped footage that should make every mother in Russia wake up screaming 200 square meters of hell outside Pokrovsk, 30 plus frozen Russian corpses in a single frame. stacked like cordwood in an anti-tank trench that was supposed to stop tanks, not become a mass grave. In tighter spots, 20 bodies crammed into 10 square meters, arms tangled with smashed motorcycles, helmets cracked open like eggs, blood frozen black on the mud. That is what Putin's liberation looks like on the ground he already declared conquered. The cycle is sickening and unstoppable. A Russian squad creeps forward, thinking the fog will hide them. An FPV drone drops out of the clouds like an angel of death, turns the point man into pink mist, and the rest scatter for the ditch. Ukraine never assumes the job is done. The drone team keeps the camera rolling because they know what comes next. Another squad, same ditch, same mistake. Euromaidan caught it perfectly. The trench clogged with corpses, burning bikes, twisted metal. A wounded Russian crawls over the dead, dragging a shattered leg, scavenging a radio from a body that used to be his friend. He whispers to another dying soldier deeper in the hole. The feed switches to a fresh FPV closing at 120 miles an hour. Impact. The wounded man is thrown back into the pile like trash. End of story. Repeat tomorrow. That is not war, that is extermination. Ukraine cannot afford mercy because mercy costs Pokrovsk. Every Russian left breathing is another Russian who will come back with a grenade tomorrow. So the drones hunt without pause, the artillery walks without pity, and the bodies stack higher than the parapets. And the worst part for Moscow, even when a wave somehow claws forward a few meters, it never holds. FPVs and bomber drones swoop in, reverse the gain, and add another layer to the corpse carpet. Putin keeps celebrating a city that is eating his army alive. But here's the twist nobody in the Kremlin saw coming. Pokrovsk isn't just holding, it's starting to bite back. On December 11th, stormtroopers from Ukraine's Skelia regiment pushed straight into the city center. Past the rubble, Putin's propagandists already called liberated and raised the blue and yellow flag right under the noses of Russian occupiers who thought they owned the place. The 7th Air Assault Corps dropped the video with a caption that hit like a gut punch. Despite the Kremlin's lies about the city being taken, Ukraine is fighting, will fight, and will not give up its territory to the occupiers. Putin's propagandists just got gut shot on camera, and they have no answer. With one video, Ukraine wiped out every last shred of credibility Moscow had left on Pokrovsk. The city has not fallen. The city is fighting. And now, for the first time in weeks, Ukrainian troops are the ones advancing inside the city limits. Not just holding. The script flipped. The hunter became the hunted. And the ditches of death are filling faster than Putin can ship new bodies to feed them. Stay with me. Because in part 3, we go inside the Kremlin panic room where Putin watched that Ukrainian flag go up, the one general who just got fired for this disaster, and the body count that's finally making Russian mothers burn tires outside recruitment centers. The lie is dead. Pokrovsk lives. And Russia is paying for every second of it in blood. If this keeps up, and it will, Russia's Pokrovsk bloodbath just handed Ukraine the one weapon Putin fears most: time. Every failed assault, every ditch clogged with Russian dead, every T-72 turned to slag in the fog, pulls troops from the sectors Moscow already owns, leaving those victories as hollow as a politician's promise. The occupied pockets around the city weaken by the hour, and that's where Ukraine's real counterpunch brews, not in grand armored thrusts, but in the shadows where a single Jaeger squad with drone overwatch can retake a neighborhood before breakfast. The ditches of death aren't just killing Russians, they're starving the beast, turning Putin's inevitable advance into a slow-motion suicide where every meter gained costs a company and every liberated block becomes a liability waiting for the next Ukrainian boot. Putin has no plan B. Zero. He's got no air superiority to crack the drone umbrella, no logistics to sustain the shell rain, no new tactics beyond send more meat. The Moscow Times crunched the numbers this week. Ukraine lost 6,500 inches Pokrovsk through November per a Russian telegram channel desperate to paint Kyiv's pain. But in October alone, Ukraine killed 25,000 Russians, most of them in this one sector. UK Foreign Office's Neil Holland piled on November 12th. It took Russia 14 months to crawl 15 kilometers toward Pokrovsk at the price of 100,000 casualties. 100,000. That's a quarter of the entire U.S. Force in Iraq and Afghanistan combined, gone for a scrap of rail yard and a coal mine, 8-to-1 superiority? Laughable when the math flips to 10 Ukrainian kills for every one of their own. Euromaidan nails the grim calculus. Russia's only strategy is volume, the human conveyor belt marching forward. But conveyor belts break, and with casualty rates here hitting peaks unseen anywhere else on the 1,000-kilometer front, the question isn't if Moscow sustains this, it's how long before the mothers, the wives, the conscripts themselves snap. Russian telegram is already buzzing with soldiers faking wounds to dodge Pokrovsk rotations, officers refusing suicidal orders, and whispers of mutiny in the rear. Putin may still take the city, but not this year. Maybe not until 2026, after he's bled the army dry for a suburb and a slag heap. And even if he does, what then? The Donetsk fortress belt stretches another 100 kilometers west, laced with the same kill zones, the same drones, the same ditches waiting to fill. Exhaust the force taking Pokrovsk, and the push to Kramatorsk becomes a pipe dream. Ukraine's holding not because they have more men, but because they fight like every life is the last one on earth. Russia fights like it's just another Tuesday. That imbalance isn't changing. Pokrovsk stands because it has to, and it's teaching Putin the lesson he should have learned in Kyiv 3 years ago. You can't conquer a people who refuse to kneel. The grinder keeps turning, and it's Russian bones getting ground to dust. I'm your host on The Military Show. If this breakdown lit a fire, smash subscribe for the unfiltered truth on every front. Don't miss the next drop. The war doesn't sleep, and neither do we. Out.